officially, and welcome to the Insurtech Breakfast. My name is Gabriela Trujillo, and I am the Marketing and Communications Manager at HITS, House of Insurtech Switzerland. It's fantastic to have you all joining us today for what promised to be a very exciting and insightful session. So today we're coming to you live from our beloved Innovation Garage within the compound of Generali in Adlisville. And while we're meeting virtually today, we're still bringing the same creativity and dynamic energy from our usual space. So today we're honored to have a truly inspired guest with us, Ennio, the CEO of Zurichberg, of someone who thrives and at the intersection of innovation, design, technology. Ennio brings a wealth of experience from his work in fintech strategy and digital transformation. So just sit, relax, and just absorb all the knowledge that we have prepared for you today. And wait, so before we dive in, just a quick note. This event is being recorded, so if you prefer not to appear in the recorded, just feel free to turn your camera off. But that said, we would love to have you and keep them on. It helps a little bit to feel a little bit more connected, interactive during the session, but it's up to you. And at the end of the presentation, as always, we will open the floor for a Q&A session. So keep your questions in mind, or you can write them in the chat and I'll save them up and maybe read them out loud later on. Okay, so without any further ado, please join me to give a warm welcome to Ennio. So Ennio, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Gabriela, and welcome from my side. I'm sorry for my voice if it's a bit, if it doesn't sound perfect, that
it's the weather.
So let me quickly start to share my screen here. I'm very happy to talk a bit about the luxury watch industry today, and thank you for joining. I think it's a good session for a Friday morning. I try to not make it too complex, right? So it's not a heavy breakfast. I try to make it a light breakfast. Please feel free to note down questions so that we can answer them at the end, because usually, in a physical setup, it's much easier. Now it will be quite a, presentation style, but I try to make it a bit interactive. And obviously at the end, I really want to take enough time to answer your questions. So I think from my side, thanks a lot already, Gabriela, for the introduction. I think not much more to add here. So I would say let's delve into. So today, I would like to talk about the past, the present, and the future of the Swiss watch industry. I actually, when I started to collect information about the past, it became super long. So we'll keep the past very short. Because you can go endless into, nearly middle age when it comes to timekeeping, right? Time has always been so relevant to people. So I cut it off in a certain way so that you don't get bored. I rather talk about the present, because especially I think in the last 2 years, there were many news about the luxury watch market. Recently, also a lot of negative news, which you might have heard. So I think it will be very interesting to talk about this. And also, as said before, feel free to note down questions and let's make this a discussion. And also when it comes to the future, it's about, we are part of HITS, so it's really about innovation. It's about thinking what could come. So for me, it's always the most interesting part. So let's not, waste too much time with the past. Let's focus mostly on the present and the future. I think to start off, I would like to know some things from you. So if you could scan that QR, or you can also just enter the link and answer this question. It would help us as a collective to see a bit where people stand, because I think the perception of what a watch is super important. So I see there is already an answer. Obviously, I will share it. You can add multiple choices, max 2, right? Interesting. Can you actually see the results? Give me quickly a thumbs up because I don't.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So then I will share them quickly. So we need to switch screen from here. So now you can see it, right? So quite interesting.
So actually, we cannot see it on the screen. Okay, now it is. Okay, good. Now we see it.
Sorry, I'm not a regular Zoom user. Excuse me. Usually Google in the Google ecosystem. So quite interesting. I think we can see a peak in status symbol, right? And then somewhat art asset and the piece of Swiss culture, some. I think that this maybe we're gonna change that today. The piece of Swiss culture goes a bit up, but it's always cool. So I think many people here in this call know that luxury watches are there, that they can be considered an asset, that it's about craftsmanship. So that's cool to start. So next. Next, I would like to know what kind of watch do you wear usually? I think in this moment, maybe none, because it's Friday 9. So that's okay, right? But let's
Ennio, sorry to interrupt you, but we cannot see. We only see your desktop. We don't see the.
Yep, we're gonna change that.
No worries.
So now you should see it, right? Thanks, Gabriela, for confirming quickly.
Yeah, we can see it.
Also very interesting. I think we see two very. I mean, Gabriela, I saw your Apple Watch already, so the rest of you, unfortunately, I cannot see, but I trust you. So we can see it's really. I mean, it's insane what market share Apple has gained meanwhile, right? By the way, when Apple launched the Apple Watch in what was that? 2000 I don't remember. I was part of the marketing team in Switzerland, and it was quite special because you might remember they introduced this gold version, which was highly limited, only sold in some places in the world for 10,000 francs. We got like 20 pieces in Zurich. We didn't sell all of them. So it was kind of also a journey for Apple because they wanted to try to become luxury. Now I think they also achieved that with Hermes and this collabs, but I think mainly the premium segment of watches is eaten by the smartwatch. And that's something we will talk later about when it comes to the present. But yeah, this is already very interesting. And the 5 people that said, I don't wear a watch, I mean, I think Nick Hayek, the CEO of Swatch, once said, the biggest risk for the watch industry in general is that people don't wear something on the wrist anymore, right? So actually, he said he thanked Apple that they came across with bringing technology to the wrist. So maybe from that aspect also interesting. So thanks a lot. That was very good to see a bit where the audience stands because yeah, I mean, I'm very glad to have an audience that has a certain affinity to luxury watches and to Switzerland. So let's talk quickly about the past. Specifically, I want to talk about how haute horlogerie, which is like the crop of the crown of watchmaking, came into place. Very specifically, I want to talk about a place that's called Vallée de Joux. I'm not sure if some of you were already there. I did not knew that this place even existed before I came in touch with watches. But yeah, it is kind of the cradle of watchmaking. To boil it down, I think, you know, watches are very old. Timekeeping is a very old technology that has always been relevant. And I would say before 1970, watches were mainly tools. I mean, we had back in the days when we were dealing with vintage watches, often watches, they didn't even have a brand because it was just you went to a watchmaker and you told the watchmaker, make me a watch, right? It was a tool to track the time. And then, as some of you might know, there was a big crisis in the 70s. And that crisis was basically due to a technology disruption because the Japanese invented the quartz technology, the battery-powered watch, which made it possible to produce on scale very cheap watches that are more precise. So for a time, it looked like the whole industry would collapse. Many manufacturers actually threw away the machines and they were like, no, it's gone, right? The mechanical watch is gone. It was just after the 70s where there was kind of a rebirth of the mechanical watch. And I think this is also the point in time, this is a bit my personal opinion, when watches moved from being a tool to a piece of art. Because also meanwhile, I mean, I often look at my smartphone, right? Just as because it's there, right? To see the time. It's not really anymore only about time telling. So let's look a bit deeper into that. So when it comes to art, I think it's really worth to look at the birthplace of haute horlogerie. And you know, I think today is a bit nicer weather than yesterday. But if you would ever go to the Vallée de Joux, you would see, we will see it later. It's a very challenging terrain. The Vallée de Joux is very famous for multiple luxury brands that are there, from Jaeger-LeCoultre to Breguet to Blancpain to Audemars Piguet. So most brands that are known sit there in this little valley and they create pieces that are absolutely astonishing, like this one or this one, made out of gold, like with a double resonance. I won't go into details. We could talk longer just about this particular piece. My aim is just to make you aware this is really art. This is hundreds of hours of craftsmanship, and it's basically the fusion of a lot of technical knowledge, right? Because it needs to work. And the aim of a mechanical watch is always to come as close as possible to the precision, like to make the most precise timepiece. And all these decorations that you see, they have a function. It's not only aesthetic. So yeah, I mean, there are many of this. By the way, these images are from a very famous photographer. He made an entire book with movements. So the Vallée de Joux is kind of a valley that sits on top of the Jura, surrounded by the biggest forest in Europe, the biggest combined forest. So you can imagine back in the time where there was no train, it was very hard to get into there. And people that lived there were mostly farmers, right? And these farmers were isolated in the winter months. As you can imagine, the winter up there is quite harsh. I mean, if you want to go there in winter, bring a warm jacket. I mean, as usual in the mountains. So the winter was really already about preparing for the summer. And what they started doing is doing parts for watches. We'll come later to how this became. This is more of how it looked yesterday, at least in Zurich. So it's very gloomy up there often. But it's kind of a mystical, magical ambience. Here you can see there's a mountain where you can oversee the whole region. It's really beautiful from the nature. Actually,
pour moi, cette forêt, elle est dense, elle est impressionnante, elle est énergisante. C'est vraiment une forêt magique où on aime se balader, où on aime courir, où on aime faire du vélo. C'est un vrai terrain de jeu. Et ce que j'aime ici, c'est ce paysage varié, le lac Et c'est surtout une nature authentique. C'est resté comme il y a 20 ans en arrière et c'est ça que j'aime retrouver. Ça fait 25 ans que je suis liée à une marpillière. J'ai pu découvrir un monde fantastique avec des valeurs dont j'apprécie, qui sont respect de la tradition, transmission des valeurs et du métier, et toujours avec le surpassement de soi. Donc l'horlogerie, l'agriculture, l'artisanat, et qui ont tous un but de faire bien les choses avec de manière précise et de pouvoir transmettre ces valeurs. Est très importante car elle fait partie de son histoire. L'horlogerie s'est créée à la vallée de Joux, a fait vivre les gens de la vallée de Joux pendant longtemps et continue à la faire vivre. Le musée atelier Marpillière est une expérience à vivre qui lie le monde du passé, le présent et le futur.
So yeah, if you ever have a weekend without a plan, I highly recommend to go there. Quick recap. Calvinism, so the Protestants, there was a big war, right, that made many of them flee to Geneva. Geneva back in the time was already very famous for jewelry, right? So many Huguenots from France went over to Geneva, and Huguenots were also very skilled in artisanry. I mean, they were very skilled jewelers. Nevertheless, under Calvin, it was not allowed to wear jewelry anymore. So they went into watchmaking, right? Because it's a tool. Nevertheless, they brought into the experience from manufacturing jewelry, and this is like, you know, where this world came together. The Genevan jewelers and watchmakers were smart people, right? So they were asking themselves, how could we expand? How could we optimize production? And they actually started to work with farmers in the Vallée de Joux because these people were bored in the winter months, and they gave them parts. They would go with like 100 parts and say, hey, can you polish that? I come back in spring. And these farmers would do that in a way that was insane. So yeah, that kept happening. And as we heard in the video, for the whole region in Geneva and in the surrounding, it has always provided a living. So this industry is essential in the culture of Switzerland, mostly the west part. And yeah, the Grand Maisons are mostly there. They're, you know, as I said before. So I always need to track the time. Let's talk a bit about the present. So now this was a short glimpse of how haute horlogerie began, where it began. So let's look at the industry now. So 16 million Swiss watches are exported every year. If you think how much watches this is quite a lot. So sometimes I think as growing up in Switzerland, you don't even realize how big that market is, because actually 95% goes out, right? So it's basically, sometimes we get bored because we're like, yeah, it's a watch, like we have watch stores everywhere, but the demand comes mostly from outside Switzerland, right? Switzerland makes nearly half of the world exports. Meanwhile, obviously Apple accounts for, I don't know, like 30% probably, or 20%. I would not know the number, but it's a big number. Nevertheless, there is no other country that has such a high market share. And, you know, here if you look at the average price of an exported watch, it's about 1,500. So this is somewhere from the segmentation between entry level and premium watch, right? Depending on how you frame it, right? But you can also see in the average watch exported to Hong Kong is a bit higher. So then you might know that for the luxury watch market, China is super important. And also maybe you have heard recently, you know, rather negative news about the Swiss watch industry in terms of, you know, falling numbers, falling production numbers, falling sales. And that's mainly due to the connection to China. It's probably the most important export market for Switzerland, and due to the, let's say, economic slowdown, obviously people buy less watches because you don't die if you don't buy a watch. So it's like, you know, in the Maslow pyramid of things, it's rather something that is beautiful, but it's many luxury goods behave like that, right? So in an economic downturn, usually the demand sinks, right? So, and I think that's what's happening right now. I also want to say that luxury markets are in general very cyclical. So many people don't know that, but this up and down is normal. And although certain watches are maybe not very correlated, most luxury goods are, right? They're really correlated with interest rates and economic growth. When you look at the segmentation, we have more than 200 watch brands in this country. I think way more if you look at the micro brands, and 700 companies. It's huge. I mean, yeah, from maybe you guys that are from the western part of Switzerland, you know that sometimes I think we around Zurich, we forget that. So you have heritage brands, family-owned companies. Then you have very small manufacturers, which are very much in trend right now, and I also find very interesting. Yeah, so you can divide them in multiple segments, and of course you have also the big luxury brand divisions and conglomerates, which we will look into in a bit. If you look at the market share, I think this is also very interesting. You can see a bit how it's divided. I don't know if you know these names, but I guess most of the names are pretty much known. You can also see a bit how to what groups they belong. So there are still some very independent families, like family brands like Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, but many other watch brands like Cartier, also Vacheron Constantin, they are meanwhile part of a conglomerate. That's also a trend. I mean, I would say it has always, also in the quartz crisis when the Swatch Group was formed, which is also one of the biggest conglomerates, and now it continues in the luxury watch segment. What's very interesting to look at, you can see that 20% that we had turned into 30 for Rolex. So Rolex has gained a lot of market share recently. So they're very successful with this strategy, although they produce millions of watches, while others has lost. I mean, if you're into the market, you can see statistics that show you a bit, what popularity of what brand has increased and decreased. And this goes down to, this is by Lux Consult, where they really look, okay, how much watches are actually sold every year, and they make a list, right? While with Rolex, you don't need to, they were mostly number one, right? What's also this is very interesting. So Rolex, you don't get a Rolex, right? I mean, if you go now to a Rolex boutique at this very moment, the chances are higher than a year ago or 2 years ago, but still you won't get a Daytona or an exclusive model, although they produce a lot of watches, more than 1 million a year. And the demand is so high, and obviously it's also a bit strategy, they make it very exclusive, right? Here you see also, I find this super interesting with the production quantities, because you can see that, for example, Patek produces around 70,000 watches a year, which is like less than a tenth of what Rolex produces. And yeah, it goes down to I mean, for micro brands, it's some thousands usually, right? So yeah, if you're interested in statistics, go to Lux Consult. They make this really good. I talked about conglomerates. So the biggest one are obviously the Swatch Group, which owns a lot of, let's say, entry-level and premium brands, which has become a very challenging market. That's why also often Swatch is mentioned in a rather negative context when it comes to, the valuation of the stock and so on, right? I think it's not really only the strategy, because, I mean, they do great stuff also with the Moon Swatch and so on, but it's mostly the segment. They have a lot of brands which are really in direct competition with the smartwatch. So yeah, it has become a harder field. While Richemont is, I would say, better placed there. They have, rather luxury brands, and that's just a different field, right? But most relevant and most interesting, at least for us at Zurichberg, are the independent family-owned companies. Because this is something you cannot access as an investor first, because you cannot buy shares of Rolex. And they're kind of they're not forced to play the group strategy, right? Yeah, this is here we can see also a bit units sold. I think just keep it in mind when you buy a watch. So yeah, now it's already time to go to the future because we don't have so much time left. I am half Italian, so if I talk too much, it's due to that. So let's look a bit about the future. I don't know if some of you have been at Watches and Wonders. That's like, you know, the biggest fair of watches. If you go there, you can feel a bit the vibe. I was there the first time recently. It's impressive. You get to feel how big this industry is. One man that was often in the news recently was Arnaud from Louis Vuitton Moët Hennessy, which in my eyes is more of a private equity firm than anything else. They started to look at very much not only watch manufacturers but manufacturers of parts. So it's funny. There is kind of a fight a bit ongoing because obviously Rolex and Patek and Audemars, they protect the industry. They try to avoid that a French company can buy these companies, which I think for Switzerland is also relevant that it stays as Swiss as possible, right? In a certain way, obviously, many Swiss companies are backed by international capital, but it would change the notion. And obviously, when it comes to innovation, most innovation happens in nanotechnology. So it's maybe less in the, that's also the beautiful thing, which I feel, it's less in the digital world, it's more in the mechanical world. So here you see, for example, when this with the NFTs came up, right? Moser & C made a watch that basically is linked directly because the QR code is the watch. Or when the reaction to the Apple Watch is quite fun because this loading symbol is purely mechanical. And if you go to MB and F, they make watches that just simply look out of space. Some trends that are visible at this moment is that it is expected that the secondary market of watches will surpass the primary market, which shows also a bit that, let's say, it seems like the primary market loses a bit focus, right? Because it's also, yeah, it's just consumer trends. And there are many business models that make it more available. I mean, starting with the big e-commerce platforms that we probably all know, like Chrono24 and so on. And now going into the future where there will be more models to buy watches that are not new. Also in terms of sustainability, I think this is a good thing. But it's also interesting because obviously, excuse me. If you want to do a business in the watch industry, I think both can work, but it seems that the secondary market will bring some opportunities. Some trends that we see at Zurichberg is definitely at the moment the rise of independent watchmakers, so small brands that produce small quantities, mostly in the high-end segment. I was just recently at the Geneva Watch Days, and it was just beautiful to see that there are so many, and they produce really things that are great of quality, also in terms of pricing, right? I mean, at least you get a lot of work for your money. Neo vintage came up even earlier, so it goes really back in time when it comes to design. You can see that not only with watches. I think maybe in the past people were just more courageous when it comes to design, while meanwhile everything needs to be very aligned and liked by a big audience, while in the past you were like bold and you could make a watch design that some people dislike and other like. I mean, if you're into arts, I always feel art needs to provoke. If art doesn't create a conversation, then it's bad design. So this is definitely something that comes up. There are many relaunch models, right, that are basically vintage models. Another thing is the gender fusion. So watches don't really have genders anymore. If you look a bit on celebrities and on Hollywood, they're very bulky men's, very thin watches, and I find it great. And there are also very fine women that wear very bulky watches, and it also looks great. So it's really, meanwhile, everything is possible. There is no clear distinguish distinction between a man's watch and a woman's watch anymore, or it just submerges, becomes unisex. And obviously, I talked already about it. Sustainability is super important, I think, in all areas of the economies, and also when it comes to materials, right? And value chains and sourcing of pristine metals and diamonds. So this is something that definitely also is a trend. And another trend, which I think many people also dislike, but it is just a trend, is that watches are perceived as assets, and in some cases even as investments. This comes basically back to 2022, right, where watch prices just were outrageous. I mean, sometimes you had multiples of 10 out of the retail price, which was quite an anomaly due to the fact that many people were sitting on cash, and during Corona you can spend it on traveling and other things. So there was a lot of demand and even less supply. And there is a economist called Veblen that describes this effect. If you search Veblen goods with a V on Google, you will hear that there are goods that when the price increases, the demand increases. And that's perfect, right? So you can see what has been happening. Nevertheless, you can also see, and I'm very fair and transparent, that the prices have come down. So we are, for the average market, mainly at the level of 21. For, let's say, the very exclusive private luxury brands, we are still above, but it's still, I mean, into 5 years, 84%. These are indexes, these are multiple watch models merged. We are maybe at a bit more than 10% increase. But this is like very short term, it's like 5 years, right? If you look at very long time horizons, you can see that certain watches, especially also Rolex, they're highly liquid, and they are nearly like money. I mean, you could honestly make an asset-backed currency by Rolex, and it would probably be more stable than most of the currencies out there, right? Which is interesting. I mean, as I said, like it or not, it's something that is interesting, that you can look at it. And obviously there was a lot of speculation, and is still, in this market. So here you can see a Patek Nautilus that outperformed the S&P by a lot, right, in the recent years. As I said, I want to be very fair and transparent. This is like stock picking. This is like, yeah, you picked Nvidia, right? Maybe a bit, yeah, it's somewhat similar. So I think it's always better to look at indices, right? To look at the portfolio and then to look at a single one. But obviously, there are many competitors also of us that use this to frame people and say watches are the best investments, right? Which we don't necessarily do. There are many good investments, but in general, yes, it's something that is highly likely to increase in value. This is also research by BCG, where you can see a bit, you know, the capital annual growth rate of also mixed baskets. So in short, I think also when it comes to volatility, yeah. Somebody wanted to say something? Okay. Also, when it comes to volatility, watches they're not very volatile, which is interesting from an asset standpoint, because I did a lot of portfolio optimization in my past, and what you want to bring down is the overall correlation, but also you want to maximize the return for the volatility you get in a portfolio, which is called the Sharpe ratio. So from that aspect, watches are definitely interesting to mix in a portfolio, right? Yeah, this is a bit the outlook. I mean, Zurichberg, I will come to what we do in a second, and then I will also stop. In short, we are seeing the market turning slowly, or we are expecting. We don't have a crystal ball neither, but obviously we look at it very closely. And I think the likelihood that the prices go in the other direction is increasingly high, right? So now let's go quickly back to Menti. I'm not sure I should have put the QR code here. So the question that I will show the QR code in a second. I want to know, what's the difference between A and B? I show it again. A and speed.
Can I say that the first one is the original intrinsic type of collection from watches, and the second one is based on like oh sorry, it's a question on that we have to reply on the.
Yeah, it's sorry, I forgot to. Here is you can
okay, sorry.
click the QR code so that you have it. Sorry, I should have put the QR code there. And then I will show it again. This is A. And this is B. And there is no right answer. I mean, somewhat. But
do you have to activate something?
Could be.
Yeah, now it's working.
Oh, no, it's working. Sorry.
It doesn't work with me.
Yeah, me neither, Ennio. It's not working.
I'm really sorry. I'm a first-time user of
No worries, no worries. Just maybe try again. We still have time, so maybe you can try again because this is. I really want to know the answer. Okay.
I'm not sure. Maybe I selected the wrong template there.
Okay. Okay, maybe you can give us the answer then.
Yeah, you still see the screen, right?
Yes, we see it. We see the option A. And now B.
I mean, basically, what you see here are blue chip watches, right? What is a blue chip watch? A blue chip watch is a watch model that is particularly important for a brand and, you know, is very liquid. For example, the Nautilus for Patek Philippe. I mean, what would Patek Philippe without the Nautilus wouldn't be Patek. It's probably the most successful model. The tank for Cartier is very, very important, right? I mean, the tank, it was the first rectangular shaped watch. I mean, Cartier was super innovative with shapes, right? And also the deep sea, I mean, the watch that goes down to, I don't know, is it 300, 400 meters? It's super, I mean, in terms of diver watch, that's like, yeah, that's levels. While this are the same models, but they are very exclusive pieces. Very, I mean, this model, I think they're the Cartier Crash. It's called Cartier Crash because kind of inspired by Dali, right? Melting. I'm not sure if 50 or 500 models are produced, but one or the other. Then the Nautilus with the Tiffany dial, highly limited. I mean, this goes in auctions for multiple millions, right? And this is a insane crafted piece by Artisan de Genève from the deep sea, right? Which has hundreds of hours of work in it. And there are like 20 watches of this kind. One is on Zurichberg right now, just as a side note. But yeah, this is so the difference is we have, and that's exactly what we focus on Zurichberg. You have blue chip watches. These are like, you know, the very famous models that are highly liquid, that are very important for the brands as well, such also as the Omega Speedmaster for Omega. I mean, what would Omega be without the Speedmaster? So similar to the term blue chip stocks, these are watches that you can buy and you can be quite sure that it will keep the value at least, right? Which is also, I think, for many consumers, meanwhile, a factor. I mean, as said, I mean, when I talk with watch dealers, they don't like this question, but it's a fact, right? That also as a brand, I think you need to be aware, people, if they spend 20, 30, 40K on a watch, they want to know if it holds the value. So with a blue chip watch, you can be sure that it does, right? And then there are these investment grade pieces. We call them investable watches. They're very rare. they're somewhat also hard to replace, which makes it not the best asset to wear sometimes, because if you cannot replace it and if you lose it or you damage it, it's not always easy. But yeah, these are, I mean, if you look at returns of these watches, it's very, very interesting. And that's where we come in at Zurichberg, and we basically come in with a model that allows people, you see it here, that allows people to invest in investable watches. So you can own a fraction of this watch and you're somewhat invested in this particular piece, right? The piece is in the safe, doesn't move because we cannot replace it, right? We can also not insure it. So that's one model, which is purely investing. And the other model with the blue chip watches is sharing. So you can say instead of having one watch, you can have three for the same price, because you can share it with other people, with your friends or like-minded individuals, where 25% of a watch gives you 3 months of wearing rights a year. These watches are not in a safe, they're on the wrist. Unless they're worn, they're insured, and they can be shared. So people can enjoy the passion of wearing watches, which anyhow is I think most beautiful when you do this together. So that's where we innovate with a co-ownership model. In short, that's what we do at Zurichberg. So one, investing in watches, two, sharing watches. How do we do that? We apply blockchain technology to, give specific proofs and trust. So the proof that the watch exists, that it's in a safe or it's somewhere, proof that it's authentic, the proof of ownership, which is obviously very easy with blockchain, right? That's what the technology is really good at. And also the fungibility, right? To make that ownership very flexible. So you can fractionalize it, you can increase, decrease your stake, you can buy it out, especially for the investment grade pieces. We have a smart contract in place that if you have 10% or more in stake of that watch, you can buy it out at any time. So you can move from fractional to full ownership seamlessly. And we use AI also for transparency, especially when it comes to valuation, which will increase tradability, which is at the moment a big problem because I cannot trade watches. I always need to sell, get cash, and then buy. And we believe that's going to change. And the big vision is also that we can embed financial services to our platform that bring value. So that's in short, how we innovate. So really in the digital space, we are one of the very few companies that apply digital technologies or that merge digital technologies and watches. So yeah, I invite you to, the video doesn't play. I invite you to go to Zurichberg.com, have a look, give me feedback. I love feedback, even if it's negative feedback. Write me on LinkedIn, send me a voicemail. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would really appreciate it because as a startup, we want to learn and grow. To close this a bit, I think there are not too much slides left, and I should anyhow probably stop talking. One, when it comes to valuation, we have a multi-factor model. So we look at multiple factors. Obviously, how much watches are produced from a specific model, how much watches are in the market. That gives you a feeling of how many people hold the asset, how many listed, and so on. But we also look at time. I think this is really when we think about the future that is becoming increasingly digital. Our investment view, so to say, is that human craftsmanship will be more valuable. And this is beautifully visible in this chart because you can see the amount of hours that go into a watch of human craftsmanship, right? So it's also something very, very nice to reflect that, because if robots and AI takes our work, yeah, probably what we do as humans is going to become art. I don't know, right? It's like we could do a session only about this philosophical question, but I think that's also the beauty of watches, that they play with that, right? So yeah, there are many, you can classify them. So yeah, I'm sorry I talked too long, but
No.
for Q&A, I hope it was interesting. I hope it gave you a good start into the Friday, and I'm happy to answer your questions now.
All right. Thank you so much, Ennio. And don't worry. I mean, that's why we're here, right? We want to share knowledge. We want to pick your brain on everything you know. You're the expert here. So let's open the Q&A. We can stretch it out, right? We only have like 12 minutes left. But if you have any questions, I see the chat. There's a few questions. Hi, Cedric. Cedric has a question. Would you like to read it yourself?
Hi everyone, yes, I can join.
Hi.
But first, some question about Apple. So as a gentleman, I can let Sam get his question first answer. And after that, if you want, we can get back to that.
Sure.
Sam, are you on the call?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I did not understand it fully.
No, because I had a question, but I saw Sam already posed the question before me. So I was letting him to have his
Oh,
answer.
just ask it. Just ask it.
Yeah.
Okay,
If you have it and Sam has it, I mean, he can answer to both. It's all right. You can write it.
So
Yeah.
mine is about because you mentioned you are using blockchain to identify like the piece are real and authentic. So my question is like, is it working only for the new pieces because you can make sure that everything is traceable? But how will you do it for the second market? And as you said, this market is going to explode in the next year actually. So it's already exploding.
Wonderful question. Thanks so much. In the primary market for new watches, I ask myself why watch manufacturers not already use the technology when they produce the watch and engrave the serial number and link it to a digital twin on the blockchain. They don't do it because it's not their world, right? But that's already, Breitling and other brands are very, they're modern and they do exactly this. So for new watches, you don't have a problem, you know exactly when it was produced, when the watch changes owner, you can do that. With second-hand watches, it's a bit, it's not that easy. So how we did it in the past is like we authentified the watch with a watchmaker, right? To ensure that the watch is authentic, original, and so on. And in the future, we'll use AI to look at the movement, to look at the proportions of the movement, to look at the finishing of the movement, the architecture, and basically comparing it to the original movement and seeing where the subtle differences are. Because that's exactly also how we can spot fake watches. I'm not a watchmaker myself, but meanwhile, I became very good in it. Because when you look at from the outside, it's nearly impossible to spot. But when you look at the inside of the movement, you will see differences. And we'll leverage technology to do that. And now there are other startups in the space that do it, for example, with glasses. Stis.com or something like this, they're called. So they produce a sapphire crystal that has an invisible embedded chip, because a crystal out of sapphire glass is usually not something you need to replace. And then you can also add it to an existing watch, right? But in short, usually the manufacturer would need to do that digital twin. Everybody else that comes after that cannot do it with 100% certainty. We believe that we can leverage technology to come close to 100% with visual recognition of the movement.
But just to follow the last one. So if me, for example, now I'm going to buy I already have watches, right? It was Tudor for me, it's luxury, right? So I'm going to buy my first luxury watches actually in 2 weeks in Zurich.
Yeah.
I finally got the call from Rolex. So, but when I look at your chart, I'm a bit disappointed, right? Because when you look at the amount of time that they are putting the watch in the price, you can see that it's more like mass market watches compared to AP. Anyway, my question to you is that if I want to believe in the future that I'm going to buy a watch that will take value in the future, because I get it at, let's say, retail price. Should I start now with a company like you to register it when it's brand new with the blockchain and the traceability? So I have less burden in terms of making sure that the piece is original for the future. Are you able to do that?
I mean, I think what we help customers with in general is once you are invested in a watch, you have a buyout option. So you have access, because certain Rolex models you cannot access. I'm not sure what Rolex you will buy now. I'm sure it's a beautiful piece, and if it's your first watch that you're going to wear, that's perfect. But in the future, if you want to have access to exclusive models, I think Zurichberg can be an option, because usually at the retailer, you need to buy a lot of other things until you go up the pyramid. And, you know, we just started about time. I think Rolex is not that, you know, manufactory where there's a lot of craftsmanship and hundreds of hours. But let me phrase it positive. I think Rolex is a wonder of a brand, because they can produce so many watches in a very high quality, the most stable secondary market prices, so a lot of stability. And yeah, that creates also a lot of value for the owner. So from that sense, I think a Rolex is an ideal way to start a journey of getting into the luxury watch market, and from there you can evolve to whatever field you like, or to whatever brand that you like, right?
Thanks. Appreciate your answer. Very good presentation, by the way, not boring at all.
Thank you. Glad to hear.
Thank you, Cedric. All right, does anybody else? Oh yeah, on the chat, we have another question. This one is from Olga. Would you like to read it out loud as well, or should I?
I'm afraid it's too loud, probably, right?
You're good?
No, it's construction site.
No worries.
Okay. How big would be the impact on the watch industry if watch brands would add a smart strap to their watch? So obviously, I'm working on the development of one, but it's always good to ask as many people as possible about their opinion. What if, you know, we add the functions of a Fitbit or any other fitness tracker just into the strap, and we change the strap and track our activities with a traditional watch? What do you think it would do to the whole industry?
I was always a big fan of this personally, because I think what it would do to the industry is, like, you don't need to compromise. You can wear a piece of art, an asset, whatever watch you like, and combine it with a smart strap that gives you the tracking abilities that we all like. As I used to own Apple Watch, it was my main focus, right? I don't like all the other stuff, but anyway. The challenge that I see is the design disruption. Because if you look at the watch, the whole design is integrated, and the bracelet is an essential part, which makes it very hard to enter the luxury watch market in the upper level. So there, I think you would need to collaborate with the manufacturer directly to integrate your technology into their design. For all the premium brands, let's say the Longines of this world, right? Where, I don't know, you can make a nice leather strap. That could be very smart, right? Because they are suffering. They're really suffering. All these brands in the middle field, they're suffering because the Apple Watch eats them, so to say. So if you can make a very nice leather strap that somewhat matches to many watches, I think that could be a game changer also for the middle industry. Yeah. So I think there it could be very impactful, like in the middle segment of the market.
Yeah, it's exactly what we are aiming. Cool. Yeah. Make it really looking nice, really made in Switzerland strap from the best of the best. Thank you.
Sounds good. I mean, I'm already your customer.
You should connect.
Yeah.
You should connect. All right. Thank you so much, Olga, for your question. All right. Does anybody else have a question? You can jump in and intervene if you want. Right? Good. All right, I'm just gonna go and quickly check the chat just in case. I don't want anybody to be left out. There are a lot of comments throughout the conversation. Nevertheless, not another question. All right, so I think we're right on time, actually. Thank you so much, Ennio, for all your insight. It's been very interesting and also insightful just to understand and learn a little bit from the past, the present, and the future of what the watch industry looks like. Nevertheless, we do, as you some of the regulars might know, at the Insurtech Breakfast, we do have this tradition of taking a snap, basically a photo of everybody who joined. So whoever wants to be in the photo, don't feel pressured, but it would be lovely to see your faces, and I can just take a quick print screen of everybody. Hold on, let me just change the view here to see all of your awesome faces. Hold on. Okay. All right, so let me just go here and we can take a snap. And here we go, 1, 2, 3, and thank you so much. It's been lovely. I want to wish you all a wonderful weekend ahead. Also, a little bit of information. The next Insurtech Breakfast will be in November, and we will keep you posted on the next trendy topic that we will tap on. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for joining, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Friday.